Hi, my name is Ben Tupper. I'm part of the team at First Universalist Church in Yarmouth that's trying to establish some guidelines on what are the best practices for opening and operating First Universalist Church this year as we enter into essentially a second year of navigating COVID. One of the documents that you will see coming out in the communications from the church is this one that you see in the background right now. And it's modeled after CDC guidelines that in turn are repackaged, modified into a more digestible way for individuals and institutions like us. It's called COVID Act Now, which is a nonprofit collaboration among a number of universities and corporations and law enforcement facilities and hospitals, just trying to distill the complex and ever-changing guidelines into something that we can all manage and handle. Because ultimately, what First U needs to do is just to manage ourselves as we enter into the varying paradigms and environments with this pandemic. So the first thing I want to show you is that at the top of this document there is a link which I'm going to select now, and it will bring you to COVID Act Now specifically for Cumberland County. And I won't spend a lot of time on this, but one thing that you'll see right away is they have a color coding system. I'm sorry if you're colorblind, but a color coding system for establishing what the level of risk is right now. We're currently just entered actually the high risk category, and you can learn more about it by clicking on the information icon, and then down here there's a link to even more information. But essentially, the metric is taking a look at 4 different elements, of which we use 3. It's the daily new cases, the infection rate, and the vaccination rate. And they've set what they have recommended threshold guidelines, of which the worst one determines our level of risk. So right now we have a very high, relatively high vaccination rate. So that's not where we're encountering elevated risk. We're incurring elevated risk from the daily new cases and from the infection rate. So those two are enough to bump us up to a high rate. If it was just one of those, we still would be bumped up to a high rate. It's always your weakest metric is the one that establishes your level. So going back to our document that we've prepared to share with you, I do want to point out that this is very much a living, organic document. It's going to be subject to change. We'll try and keep it updated, which we're meeting very frequently, as understanding about how to manage COVID change and how conditions are changing on the ground. So we'll keep this posted on the website, and it'll be available also through links from channels. So it's divided into 2 sections. The top section is the one that is essentially looking at the metrics provided by COVID Act Now, covidactnow.org, and it's divided into different phases of implementation, like when do you establish which kind of risk you're going to have. So the way you look at it is you want to be over in the blue, what we call phase hope, where you have very high immunization rates, very low new cases on a daily basis, and essentially no infection rate at all. That's our goal. The worst case scenario is over to the left in the red column. It's called phase 1. It's very high or severe risk, so you can imagine that we're going to manage those 2 extremes very differently. So you can read about these in more detail at covidactnow.org, and these are the thresholds that we've selected, essentially based on reading over their materials and making a judgment call. Now I want to turn your attention to the second half or the second portion of this, and that is where we have broken it up into different activities like worship, choir, food, children and youth activities, nursery and childcare, and things like that. And so for each category, we've tried to come up with statements about how we want to best manage so that we can, as much as possible, participate in kind of the traditional church-like activities, but also manage the risk so we're not being, we're not encumbering people with greater risk than what we should. I won't go into a great deal of detail. As you read through these, keep in mind they are going to possibly change over time. Things are going to look a little bit different when we get together, if we can get together. And so anyway, that's really what I wanted to share with you, is the way to read this. Obviously, the blue column is the best, the red column is the worst case scenario, and probably the most difficult to negotiate for all of us will be, how do we go between this green, the yellow, and the orange? So anyway, we'll all put our shoulder to the wheel and make the best choices we can collectively. And that's all. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Reverend Hillary or a member of the board, and they can help you find any answers that you're looking for. Thanks so much.